had rented a remote cabin for a week, hoping to escape city life. It was deep in the woods, far from neighbors, a place where the only sounds were rustling leaves and distant birds. The cabin itself was old but cozy, with a stone fireplace and wooden floors that creaked under my weight. For the first few days, everything felt peaceful, just as I'd hoped. But on the fourth night, something changed. I was sitting by the fire, reading a book, when I heard a soft scratching outside. At first, I told myself it was just a branch brushing the cabin wall, or perhaps an animal. But the scratching persisted, moving from one side of the cabin to another. It was deliberate, almost taunting. My heart raced, and I grabbed a flashlight. Outside, the light revealed something that froze me in place. Big, deep scratches on the trees, all pointing toward the cabin. Fresh, dark stains on the bark, almost like dried blood. The realization hit me. Someone, or something, had been here, watching me. I forced myself to calm down, thinking rationally, but the unease wouldn't leave. I decided to go for a walk, hoping movement and fresh air would help. The woods were thick and shadowed, the trail twisting unpredictably. I felt eyes on me with every step, but when I turned, there was nothing. Returning to the cabin, I noticed the front door, which I had locked tight, slightly ajar. My pulse surged. Inside, everything seemed in place at first, but then I noticed the details. The furniture slightly shifted, the fireplace ash scattered as if disturbed, the air colder than it should have been. Someone had been inside while I was away. The scratching returned that night, louder, sharper, more insistent. I grabbed a flashlight and a heavy wrench, determined to confront whatever was outside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing fresh footprints in the mud behind the cabin. Human-like, large, and then gone. They ended as abruptly as they began, as if whoever or whatever was here had vanished into thin air. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, groan, and whisper of the cabin made me jump. I stayed awake until dawn, heart pounding, eyes scanning the windows. The sense of being watched never left. By morning, I decided to leave early. As I packed, I noticed the trail of footprints had been washed away by overnight rain. Whoever or whatever had been there had disappeared, leaving only the memory of their presence. Driving away, I glanced back at the cabin. The scratching had stopped, but the feeling of being followed lingered. Weeks later, I spoke with a local. Stories of someone or some people stalking cabins in the area were not uncommon. Vandalism, disappearances, strange encounters. It was a warning I hadn't realized I'd received firsthand. Even now, when I close my eyes at night, I hear a faint scratching sound, almost at the edge of perception. Sometimes it wakes me, my heart racing as if the cabin itself had followed me home. I know I shouldn't dwell on it, shouldn't think of it, but the memory refuses to fade. That cabin, once a place of solitude and peace, had become a reminder. Isolation can be dangerous, and sometimes the quiet is never empty. Pause. Sometimes it's watching, waiting. I came across it while hiking through the thick woods. Pause. The cabin looked abandoned, barely visible through the dense trees. Its wooden walls were faded and gray, the roof sagging under years of neglect, and the windows coated in dirt and grime. Something about it drew me closer, a mixture of curiosity and unease I couldn't explain. I pushed the front door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the quiet forest. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the smell of rot. A wooden table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by broken chairs. Thick layers of dust covered the floor, untouched for who knows how long. Every step I took left footprints, clear evidence of movement in a place that had been still for years. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars. Dust obscured their contents, but I wiped one clean to find dried plants inside. Another held brittle small animal bones. A sudden creak from the floorboard made me freeze. It wasn't under my feet. Something, or someone, had moved. My heart raced as I turned, but the room remained empty. I tried to convince myself it was the old wood settling, but a growing unease crawled along my spine. A narrow staircase led to the upper floor. Each step groaned under my weight. Upstairs, the room was just as dusty. An old bed leaned against the wall, and in the corner stood a large wooden chest. My curiosity overcame fear. The chest was heavy and locked, but the rusty lock gave way with some effort. Inside were old clothes, yellowed papers, and a small metal box. The box contained black and white photographs. Families, couples, and children posed outside the same cabin I now stood in. A man appeared in almost every photo, always lurking in the background. His face was blurred or partly hidden, but the eyes seemed to pierce right through me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The last photo showed the cabin from the outside. There he was, standing at the window, staring directly at the camera. Or perhaps at me. I slammed the box shut. Panic surged. Something was wrong. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in my rush. The front door, which I had left open, was now closed. My hand shook as I pushed it open, fleeing into the woods. I ran without looking back, the feeling of being watched pressing on me with every step. Only when I had put distance between myself and the cabin did the immediate fear subside, but the memory of the man's empty dark eyes never left me. Even now I avoid that part of the forest. Sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I catch shadows moving, fleeting glimpses of something lurking. Every so often, I feel that same chilling certainty that the man from the photos is still out there, waiting, watching, patiently, relentlessly. We were sent to a remote area for a work assignment. A cabin deep in the woods far from any town. Pause. The cabin looked abandoned, its roof crooked, wood gray and weathered. Something about it made my stomach tighten, but we had no choice. It was where we had to stay for the next few weeks. The first nights were quiet. Crickets chirped, leaves rustled, and the occasional owl hooted. But soon, I noticed something unusual. Small noises at first. A floorboard creaking here, a thump there. I assumed it was the cabin settling, but the sounds grew too regular, too deliberate. It was like someone was pacing outside, circling the cabin in the darkness. Each night, I would lie awake listening, heart racing, straining to catch every step. I felt eyes on us, watching from just beyond the tree line. One night, I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, measured, almost as if whoever it was knew we were inside. I froze, hoping they'd leave, but the door creaked like someone was trying to open it. My hands trembled as I gripped my rifle, pointing it toward the door, ready for anything. And then, just as suddenly, the noise stopped. Silence returned heavier than before. The next day, I discovered footprints around the cabin. Barefoot, human, deeply imprinted in the dirt, as if someone had been there all night. My colleagues shrugged, saying it was probably one of us playing a prank, but I knew better. The unease that gnawed at me was real. Something did not want us here. The final night was the worst. I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, I heard it again. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving inside the cabin. My breath caught. Then came the breathing. Low, rough, coming from the corner of the room. I froze. I wanted to move, to grab my rifle, but my body was paralyzed with fear. The breathing drew closer until I could feel it, smell it, sense it right next to me. And then, silence. By morning, I packed my things and left the cabin immediately. I didn't care about orders or the work we were supposed to finish. I didn't look back. I just needed to get away. But I felt it. Eyes following me, watching me leave. I knew the presence wasn't gone. It wasn't going anywhere. Even now, years later, I can't shake it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that faint echo of breathing, like the cabin has followed me. Some places, I've learned, are alive in ways you cannot understand. They feel your presence. They remember. And they wait. Pause. No matter how far I go, I know the cabin is still out there, in those woods, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting visitors. I had rented a remote cabin for a week, hoping to escape the chaos of city life. Pause. The place was deep in the woods, far from neighbors or any signs of civilization. The cabin itself was old but charming, with a stone fireplace, wooden floors that creaked with every step, and windows that framed the dense forest outside. The first few days were peaceful, brooding by the fire, walking the trails, drinking in the solitude. But on the fourth night, something changed. I was sitting by the fire, a book in hand, when I heard it. A soft scratching sound outside, like someone dragging something across the ground. At first, I thought it was a branch or a small animal, but the noise persisted, growing louder, more deliberate, almost like it was moving closer to the cabin. The next morning, I tried to dismiss it. I went for a hike through the surrounding woods to clear my head. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. But then I noticed something unsettling. Deep scratches on the trees, all pointing toward the cabin. Some of the bark had dark stains, dried in a way that looked disturbingly like blood. My stomach turned, and I quickened my pace back to the cabin. When I arrived, my unease worsened. The front door, which I was certain I had locked, was slightly ajar. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I pushed it open cautiously. Inside, everything seemed in place, but the oppressive feeling didn't fade. That night, the scratching began again. Louder, more frantic. I grabbed a heavy wrench from the storage closet and went outside with a flashlight, shining it across the yard. There were footprints in the freshly disturbed dirt, large, human-like, and unmistakably recent. But they ended abruptly at the edge of the forest, as if the person had vanished into thin air. I stayed awake the rest of the night, every creak and groan of the cabin making my heart leap. The following day, I learned from a local that the area had a history. Cabins in these woods were sometimes targeted by a stalker who would lurk unseen, sometimes vandalizing, sometimes worse. My heart sank. I realized I had been alone in a place where someone or something could be hiding just beyond my sight. The final night was the worst. Lying in bed, I heard footsteps inside the cabin, slow and deliberate, moving from one end of the room to the other. My hand shook as I clutched the wrench, telling myself it was a trick of my imagination. But then I smelled it, the foul, unmistakable odor of someone very close. breathing heavy, low, right next to me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The minutes stretched into eternity. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence returned, thicker than before. I packed my belongings at first light, heart pounding, and left without looking back. Even now, weeks later, I feel the weight of those woods pressing down on me in quiet moments. Sometimes, late at night, I can swear I hear a faint scratching, a low footstep, a whisper behind me. The cabin didn't just exist in the forest. It followed me, a lingering shadow, waiting for the next opportunity to make itself known. Some places are not meant to be found. Some cabins are not meant to be entered. And I know now that even the safest seeming hideaways can hide secrets that watch you long after you've left. It was supposed to be a simple weekend away. Pause. After the divorce, I thought a cabin in the woods would give me a break from everything: memories, stress, and the constant noise of the city. The cabin was far out, hidden behind dense trees, surrounded by thick undergrowth. A small stream ran nearby, its gentle babble almost soothing. At least it should have been. I arrived in the late afternoon, the sun sinking behind the trees and long shadows stretching across the small yard. I unpacked my car, brought my bags inside, and lit a fire in the fireplace. The warmth and crackling soot soothed me, and for a moment, I felt at ease. I made coffee, settled into the old armchair by the window, and watched the woods darken. But something was off. The usual peace I felt in this cabin had vanished. There was a tightness in my chest, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I told myself it was stress, but my eyes kept scanning the trees outside, noticing movement that didn't belong. Then I heard it, a twig snapping just beyond the tree line. I froze. Maybe a deer, maybe nothing. But the sounds kept coming, footsteps crunching leaves, moving closer, circling the cabin. Not heavy, not light, deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The cold air hit me, sharp and biting. I scanned the woods, nothing. Silence, unnatural silence. My heart raced, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I went back inside, locked the door, tried to calm myself, but sleep was impossible. Every creak, every whisper of wind made my pulse spike. Hours passed. I finally lay down, keeping the flashlight within reach. Then, the footsteps on the porch. My heart thumped so loudly, I thought it might give me away. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Whoever it was lingered there. Then they moved along the side of the cabin, stopping right outside my bedroom window. I stared at the glass, expecting a face to appear, but there was nothing. Minutes felt like hours before the sound faded into the woods. Morning came, but exhaustion didn't erase fear. I stepped outside. That's when I saw them. Fresh human footprints circling the cabin. My stomach turned. I quickly packed everything, throwing it into the car without a second thought. And then I saw it. A folded note, half buried in the dirt near the cabin door. My hands trembled as I picked it up. 3 words, written in a handwriting I knew instantly. I'm watching you. I jumped into the car, heart pounding, and drove away without looking back. Even now, years later, I feel it. The certainty that somewhere, in some shadow, he's waiting, watching. The woods may be far behind me, but the fear never left. Sometimes when I sit quietly in my apartment, I hear the echo of those footsteps in my mind. I know that no matter where I go, some things cannot be outrun. I never imagined I'd see him again, especially not here. Pause. The cabin had always been my sanctuary, a place to escape after the divorce. Nestled deep in the woods, far from the nearest road, it was surrounded by trees so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. The isolation had always been comforting. Quiet, peaceful, a perfect refuge. That afternoon, the sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks as the sun began to set. Shadows stretched long across the yard, twisting among the fallen leaves and the wild grass. I parked the car, unpacked my bags, and carried them inside. The cabin smelled faintly of pine and old wood, a comforting mix that reminded me of past visits. I lit the fireplace. The crackle of the flames and the warmth on my skin helped me let go of the tension I had carried for months. I made coffee and settled into the old armchair by the window. Outside, the forest slowly turned darker, the shapes of trees and branches merging into shadows. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax, feeling safe, but that feeling didn't last. A creeping unease began at the edges of my mind. Something wasn't right. Pause. A twig snapped. My pulse jumped. Probably just a deer, I whispered to myself. But the sound persisted, soft, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. They weren't heavy, not like a human's usual steps, but too large to be a small animal. My chest tightened. I gripped the flashlight and stepped outside. The cold air bit at my skin. The forest was unnaturally quiet. Too quiet. I scanned the tree line, eyes straining to pierce the darkness. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger, pressing on me like an invisible weight. I returned inside, locked the door, and tried to calm myself, but sleep wouldn't come. Hours passed in restless listening. Every creak, every rustle of leaves made my heart pound. Then the footsteps again, on the porch, right outside the bedroom window. My body froze, every nerve alive with fear. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I just listened. Slowly the sounds moved away, fading into the woods, but the dread stayed with me long after. Morning brought no relief. Fresh human footprints circled the cabin, etched deep into the soil. My hands shook as I packed my things, throwing everything into the car. That's when I noticed it. A folded note, weighed down by a small rock. My breath caught, 3 words in his handwriting. I'm watching you. I didn't wait another second. I drove away as fast as I could, never looking back. Even now, years later, I feel it. The certainty that someone is out there, always waiting, somewhere, in the shadows. Someone knows I'm vulnerable, and I can never forget it. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. My ex-wife and I thought a few days in a cabin deep in the woods would ease the tension between us. Pause. The cabin was small and old, tucked far from town, 1 bedroom, a fireplace, and a tiny kitchen. It felt like it had been there forever, like it had witnessed countless visitors come and go, and yet something about it seemed aware. The first night was quiet. We ate a simple dinner, exchanged small talk, and went to bed early. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. The kind of silence that makes you hear things you normally wouldn't. The creak of a floorboard, the whisper of the wind outside, the way shadows seem to stretch longer than they should. We pretended to sleep, each of us aware of the other's presence, yet uneasy. The next day, we decided to walk the paths around the cabin. Narrow, overgrown trails wound through the forest, overgrown with shrubs and branches that clawed at our clothes. The further we went, the tighter the trees seemed to close in around us. It felt as though the forest itself was watching, its shadows moving with a life of their own. Words were sparse, footsteps loud in the quiet, and by the time we returned to the cabin, the sun had nearly disappeared behind the trees. That night, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Pause. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that being far from the world and alone in the woods was playing tricks on my mind. But then I heard it. A soft creak, like a floorboard giving way under someone's weight. I froze. My pulse thundered. I slowly turned around, expecting someone or something. But the hallway was empty. Only the shadows stretched across the walls. Later, I got up to use the bathroom. The cabin was pitch black, the last bits of fire in the fireplace flickering low. Another creak, closer this time. I spun around, heart pounding, but again, nothing. And then the faintest sound of breathing, low and deliberate, seemed to brush against my ear. I wanted to move, to run, to grab anything for protection, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. Morning brought no comfort. My ex-wife's side of the bed was empty, cold, neatly pulled back blankets, her belongings untouched. I called out her name. Silence. I searched the cabin, the yard, the surrounding trees. Nothing. No footprints, no signs she had left voluntarily, only the whisper of the wind through the trees. Panic settled in, like a stone in my chest. Hours passed. The sun's warmth did little to ease the dread. By nightfall, the cabin felt colder, oppressive, and alive. Every shadow seemed to move on its own. Every floorboard groaned with intention. I stayed awake, clutching whatever I could find, listening for anything. Her return. A sound. A hint of what had taken her. At dawn, I left, packed quickly, heart hammering, not daring to look back. The path we had walked seemed to vanish behind me. Swallowed by the forest, drove to the nearest town, called the police. But their search yielded nothing. No trace of her, no evidence she had even been there. It was as though she had vanished into the air itself. Even now, thinking back, I can still feel that cabin's presence. The way it seemed alive, aware, as if it had chosen her. The forest still whispers at night, and every so often, I feel eyes on me. I don't know what happened or why she was taken, but I know one thing. That cabin waits, patient, hungry, for the next person to step inside. And I can't escape the certainty that one day, someone else will vanish just as she did.